The show's going to be a little different this season.
We are referring to this as Game of the Game. Well, the game is that there's a hat. In that hat, there are prompts. We do not know what these prompts say.
You and we both don't know what we're going to be talking about next episode. Cookie Pocket, the game of the game.
The game of the game of the game of the game of the game.
Well, it's the game of the game.
Didn't he say he has like double incisors or something?
Double
like
incisors.
Yeah, he says he was born with 4 extra incisors, which is so specific that it must have been true of, I almost said Freddy Krueger, of Freddie Mercury. Like that's too specific for them to have completely fictionalized it. But then again, the character that Mike Myers plays wasn't even real. So
he gave that. He gave like he wasn't a real character, or he was like embodying like 7 different people.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll go into the whole Rhapsody. We'll go into the whole Bohemia and where the Rhapsody is, which is in Bohemia. And today we will go over the prompt. The prompt was what? I already forgot.
Oh, a film that changed directors mid-production.
Yes.
During shooting.
Yes.
During shooting. During shooting was the verbatim. I already forgot who the other director was. I'm going to be honest with you.
Dexter Fletcher.
Who
directed Rocketman.
Rocketman. Oh!
Which I think is a better movie than this. And I think...
Wow.
I don't think Rocketman's great, but I do think Rocketman is a better movie than this movie. And I think watching the two, you can see where the stuff that even kind of vaguely works in this probably came from.
This is why we have subject matter experts on this podcast. Sometimes we just forget. Yeah. Bohemian Rhapsody. Bryan Singer.
Like a...
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. I was going to say Dexter Fletcher sounds like the name of a fictional British director. I don't want to malign this man that I do not know.
Who appears in like an Edgar Wright movie.
I will have to say Bryan Singer's X-Men films are better than this. I have to say that. Bryan Singer is a very questionable director. We like having questionable directors on this podcast in general, I feel like. And usually we just say questionable as the catch-all term instead of somebody who is sexually depraved that commits acts of violent-esque nature. But anyway, Bohemian Rhapsody. All right. Biopic, right? Biopics. The thing about biopics, I think, is at some point there are some people that have enough complex events or complex interactions that define them and their uniqueness to the point where it almost can't even be captured in one film, I would say. I wouldn't say that's like a catch-all for sure, but it's a general principle that there are some people that, artists in particular, are remembered for very arbitrary things or things that have very little to do with their art, or it has everything to do with their art and nothing to do with their personality. Somehow, I feel like this film has done both of those things. It has tackled sexual orientation, who is the antagonist of this film, and it has also tackled all the songs everybody knows and loves. Yeah. So if you're in 2016, 2016, I am an LGBTQ ally and I love Queen. I'm going to watch this film. That, I feel like, is the Bryan Singer mentality. That is like the vision of this film. That is literally the depth. Okay. And for me, it was really annoying. To be clear, I have no issue with portraying homosexuality in media.
Thank you, Mitchell.
However, but
I have a lot of problems with Queen.
I have every problem. Why did they name it Queen? I have every problem with the way it was treated in this film. It was haphazard. It was misread. The relationships are not really treated with much care. I would say Mary's interactions, I would argue, probably are like the best, but that's not really saying much because everything is just reduced. Everything is reduced, and Zach put it perfectly. Hopefully it got on the recording, but he said Wikipedia page. It was literally like they were writing the screenplay from the Wikipedia page. And some of the lines that Freddie has is like sounds like it's from like the biography section or from the early life section or the career section. And it's very frustrating. But now that I'm done my tangent, please go ahead, guys.
Well, yeah, I think Bohemian Rhapsody at this point, I think, because that is the film that we're talking about, in case we haven't very deliberately introed that. I feel like when this came out, because this came out when we were in either our junior or very early senior years of high school. I can't remember which, but I remember when it came out, I feel like I remember it getting a lot of praise, especially Rami Malek's take on Freddie Mercury. I remember when the trailers dropped and everybody was saying, "Oh, he's the spitting image." There were all of these clickbait articles, unrecognizable, which is always the go-to clickbait word. So-and-so is unrecognizable in this new promo image, this new trailer for so-and-so film. And then the movie came out, and I feel like it was still fairly positive. And then the Academy Awards came around, and it won 4 awards, most for sound, which, to be totally honest, people don't usually pay attention to. Those are awards that sometimes they like give out during the commercials when nobody's watching. But I think the most egregious one is it won Best Editing. And at least in my sort of sphere of discussion, because 2019 to 2020, I was in my first year at film school. That was the award that people mainly talked about as, oh, Bohemian Rhapsody, boy, wasn't that bad. And it won Best Editing. Can you believe that? And I think that, yeah, it's not great. I don't think it's the sort of rose-tinted glasses at the time. I don't think it's aged particularly well. And I do think, especially because Mitchell sort of brought it up, that its take on Freddie's homosexuality, whether it's deliberate or not, is very odd, especially coming from a gay director. That the film more or less portrays Freddie's being gay as some sort of like an insidious influence upon his life that led him to these destructive places. And it's very odd. I was thinking while watching this as well, why Bryan Singer for this movie. Because Bryan Singer isn't really a director I think of as having a particular style. I don't really think of him. When I think of Bryan Singer, I think of the original X-Men trilogy that he made. Well, 2 of them, and then the third one went to Brett Ratner. And then I think of Usual Suspects. But those movies don't have a lot of continuity in my mind, visually or artistically. And so I guess what kind of clicked in my head was, okay, well, when the X-Men trilogy were coming out, I actually watched a really good video essay about this a couple weeks ago about how that early 2000s X-Men trilogy sort of recontextualizes the X-Men as sort of the struggle of LGBTQ plus people and feeling as if they're in a minority and as if they're feeling persecuted. Ian McKellen also talked about that during the marketing for it as well. And so bringing on Bryan Singer for that felt appropriate because those were experiences he could speak to. And that's something that seems to appear in a lot of his movies, even ones where he's making the film about an overtly villainous character. Apt Pupil, which is a Stephen King adaptation, features this kid who's like tortures cats, and Ian McKellen plays this local like escaped Nazi general or something that he starts persecuting. But there's also just an element in there of him being an outsider and maybe questioning his sexuality and feeling persecuted. And so that's a consistent element that I think runs throughout all of Bryan Singer's work. And it's here, but it's as if he was just kind of sick of that as a theme and decided to flip it on its head and play it the opposite way. Very strange. I mean, there's a lot of Queen songs in it. They're fun to listen to. The way that they're incorporated is very repetitive. And I guess some of the concert stuff is fun. I don't know. I don't know how much I really have to say about this because it's very generic. And I think the first time I watched it on an airplane, and it's a pretty I think it's a bearable airplane movie. Like when the engines are roaring in the background, so you have to turn up the sound a little too loud so it hurts your ears. But the songs are in there to keep, and at least those are mixed in a way that works in your headphones.
You want water and a cookie?
It's fairly long, so it'll take you through most of the flight. And I think that's a good function of it. Actually sitting down to watch this on a Sunday morning, I did find myself thinking a lot like, boy, okay, this is like it's like a heart monitor. It goes beep, 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 up, down, up, down, up, down. We're in a fight, somebody plays a bass line. We're in a fight, somebody suggests stomp clap. We're in a fight, and that's just the whole movie. Rambly thoughts, but I gave it a 2 out of 5. Did not think it was particularly good.
Mm-hmm. My first time seeing this movie was on a rather awkward and unsuccessful would have been first date. So I have some prejudice towards this coming into it as a rewatch. Mm-hmm. I think this is one of these movies where if you're someone in the crowd that watches maybe like 10 to 20 movies a year or fewer, you'll do one of two things when watching this movie. You'll probably find it like watchable, fun, and fine, or maybe you'll call it like the worst movie ever made. I feel like the Wonder Woman sequel had a reaction like this when it came out, where if you don't watch a ton of bad movies, maybe this movie's vices really stand out to you. Or on the other hand, if you're an especially casual viewer that doesn't know Queen super well and is being introduced to many of these songs for the first time on a basic sense level, you will find it enjoyable. So I that's my way of moderating this. I also landed on a 2 out of 5. I don't think it's particularly special. I do think it approaches things in a checklist manner. I found myself surprised by how much of this I remembered because I didn't necessarily love the film the first time I saw it. I was had a more casual knowledge of Queen at the time. So I would say maybe at least 40% of the songs I had been hearing for the first time I saw this movie. So that has its value, but as a film, I found it pretty forgettable. This time around, I found fewer things redeemable, and my maybe unpopular opinion is I don't think Rami Malek's all that good in this. I found his prosthetics really distracting, and I find his sort of like wide-eyed. He has this like, I don't know. The way his ego changes as Freddie grows older, and I think the prosthetic teeth are pretty rough in the first act. It kind of works better when he has the mustache, and it doesn't look quite as egregious, but
it disguises it. Yeah,
the wig. Yeah, there are a lot of things working against him, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Mm-hmm. But I still feel like the way he approaches it is just a very, like the rest of the movie, broad strokes, not super nuanced. I think the rest of the band members lack distinction. I think they're basically just the other 3 members of Queen, the whole movie.
Yes.
I mean, Brian's probably like the closest to having any sort of like individual, but even then, like that comes from how he talks to Freddie differently than the other guys do, I feel like. So,
and his role is mainly just to go like, no, Freddie, it's a good idea.
Exactly.
And that's kind of it.
the in a movie that should be really about the band, where Freddie literally says in the film, "We're all Queen. I am not Queen. We're all Queen." Right? Why are the other band members either like, "Oh, that's good. Oh, that's not good. Oh, get in the room. Get out. Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, we're mad. Why are you?" And it's just like, can you guys talk for more than 2 sentences?
Well, this is interesting, actually, because I know the surviving members of Queen, maybe not Adam Lambert, because I don't really know to what extent he counts, but
he does not count.
The surviving members of Queen were apparently like very involved creatively with this. And originally this movie was going to be made with Sacha Baron Cohen as Freddie Mercury, not as a comedy, but he really wanted to focus on the depravity of Queen and the true depravity of Freddie's lifestyle. all the drugs and the sex, because if you read reports of like Queen parties from the time and what Queen was like on tour, they were absolute maniacs. And apparently the surviving members really voted to tone that down, and were part of why Cohen eventually ended up leaving the project and being replaced. So they did have some influence. And I there was some fear, I feel like, at the time, that the movie was going to be a movie about how great Freddie Mercury was, but how even though he's dead now, Queen is still a really good band. And I feel like it didn't really end up being that, but it does seem strange that if the rest of the band had this kind of sway over the production, I don't know. I feel like they would have exerted a little more force to make them more than Freddie Mercury and the other guys.
It's almost like they lack self-awareness, or sometimes it's better to get like a third-party analysis of it, or like talk to people that know the band and like understand the history, because the band members themselves, and for any artist, do not understand their own history more than other people that have studied them. So if we're just going for pure accuracy and like comprehensiveness, which this film completely lacks, then like I feel like the band members are the wrong people to talk to in that regard, or at the very least corroborate their stories with, because I mean, this was bound to be mentioned anyway. The Live Aid performance timeline is completely messed up. Telling them he has AIDS, which was a critical thing. That also, God, that was the most like hard to watch scene when he goes and finds out he has AIDS, and then there's this random patient in the hallway, and he's like walking out, and then he does the AO, and he does the AO back, and then the patient's like smiling. I'm like, oh my God, this is like the worst. That was my least favorite part. That was so horrible.
It's usually, I think, a biopic of any kind. It's often, I think, at least a mark of it going of generic. If the person that it's about is still alive and gives, or any of the people that it's about are still alive and give it a full seal of approval. Because usually I feel like, especially if somebody's a fairly controversial figure, if they're putting the seal of approval on a movie or a play or whatever that's being made about them, a lot of the time that means that they've had a hand in going, okay, you can mention that, you can't mention that, you can't mention that. You can kind of mention that, but don't lay into "I'm in love with my car" too hard. And they have control of those levels, which tends to make things not as interesting.
I think there needs to be more weird stuff, at least between the bandmates. I think to an extent you can sanitize things like their actual career or the progression of their performances and their songwriting. But at every stage, just the interactions between the bandmates are so sterile. Like the whole "I'm in love with my car" bit is like the most mild, stakesless ribbing of one another. And when they first meet outside and Freddie like just starts singing at them, and they're like nodding like that's like that would ever work,
and then they join in.
Good you are as a singer. And it's like very heinously compressed and auto-tuned, and it's just, it takes you out of it. Every interaction, whether it's like the introduction or when they're on good terms or when they're reuniting, it just felt so artificial to me.
Speaking of "I'm in love with my car," there's so many things that I don't know. This movie walks this weird tightrope where it fictionalizes so much of this actual story and rearranges things and makes people up and sanitizes things. And yet things that it could have rewritten to make into actual like satisfying narrative devices, it just doesn't do. For all the amount that we hear about "I'm in love with my car," we never actually hear the song. And I feel like in a more fictionalized film, a satisfying narrative device, the payoff to that could have been they play it at the Live Aid concert or something. And not like I'd be asking for that, but that would have at least been payoff to this thing that they're setting up that just instead doesn't really go anywhere, because it's more of a substitute for the fact that they don't want them to actually disagree with or dislike each other. At least not in any way that can't be resolved by somebody laying down a sick riff, and all of a sudden all dissatisfactions and disagreements are set aside so that we can start rehearsing and cut to a concert 3 months later.
And something that Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Mitchell. I'll say.
All right. I was just gonna say, with the Wikipedia page thing, because sometimes I reference the wiki of like the person if it's a biopic, because I'm just curious.
Mm-hmm.
And Freddie starts playing the piano like riff or whatever of Bohemian Rhapsody, right? And that's when I checked the time, and it was 17 minutes. I was like, I'm gonna put this in my review because this is like, I can already tell this is setting the tone for the whole film, right? And I'm like, okay, it probably did happen. So I look on the wiki, and it's like, when he was at da-da-da house, he played on the piano the riff to Mary and said this line. And I was like, oh, that's what he said in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess it's real then. And that's it. There's no depth to it. It is purely to tease the audience because the title song, like one of the most popular songs in human history, is going to be played at some point. Mm-hmm. We all know it's going to be played, and then they make a big deal out of it. They have now the studio sequence, film wise, it was pretty cool. I liked how they filmed it, the little snap cuts and all that. Pretty interesting, not super creative, but pretty engaging. And then they play it on the radio because that's what really happened, and it's following the wiki page, and yeah, that's it. Bohemian Rhapsody, the film, has played Bohemian Rhapsody, and it's just like, this is made just to be the most accessible piece of media of all time. Literally wanted to get as many people to watch this film as possible. I hate that, and I thought it was offensive, frankly.
Yeah, as long as we're laying into things that are too simplistic, I also think the way it references Freddie's conservative family is really annoying. Yeah. Like they mention their Zoroastrian faith at one point. And there's this one like particularly obnoxious scene towards the end of the movie when he brings home the guy, and his parents are like sitting there, gullible as ever, and they're like, "Well, who is this man?" And Freddie like reaches over and grabs his hand and is like, "He's my friend." And it's like, "Oh my God, get me out of here!" But there's no real critical exploration of what his family values or how he was raised beyond this like generic conservative veil. And which leads me to a question I wanted to ask you guys. Do you think this film would be more successful if it focused on a specific region of Freddie's life or Queen's career? Or do you think that the flaws it exhibits now would more or less remain the same if it covered half or a quarter of the time?
I was thinking about this as we got ready for recording today. Clearly the movie wants to use Live Aid as like a big kind of centerpiece. And so I think this could have been more of a success if they focused on the prep for Live Aid and making Live Aid happen. And you can still incorporate sequences of the older stuff, but incorporate it as honest to goodness flashback, not just this sort of skimming of all of history as quickly as possible so we can get to Live Aid. Because I think that in itself is its own story. I know a lot of the artists who played at Live Aid hadn't played together in a very long time. A lot of the Live Aid sets, I haven't actually sat down and watched all of Live Aid, but having read things and heard things over the years, I've heard that a lot of the artists that performed at Live Aid kind of sounded awful because they hadn't played together in a long time and didn't have time to rehearse as much. And part of like the appeal of the Queen set is that they did actually sound pretty good together and put on a good show. I think you could make a full feature out of them just prepping for that after not having played together for so long. But then, you know, you can't show them touring and first getting together. And I think they really could have made something out of a more specific window, even if it would mean not incorporating my favorite Queen song, Invisible Man, which I believe they recorded and put out after Live Aid.
And most of the money from Live Aid went to the Ethiopian prince and guns as well, apparently.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, this kind of goes back to the point I made earlier. I mean, I do think there are some personalities that in most cases, unless you had a really skilled and experienced director in that field and had some like A1 casting and really good writing. I think there are some people that are just way more interesting and artistically viable, but I would say that their art kind of speaks for itself and it doesn't really need to be retold. There are some people that should not have biopics made about them, is the conclusion I would say. And I think, like what Zach had mentioned, I immediately was just thinking like the format of Get Back, or just like some type of documentary type format, because first of all, I watched the real Live Aid, and that made me realize, wow, my favorite part of this film is better if you just watch the actual thing, because it's literally exactly the same thing, except worse. And with CGI crowds. And the other thing is, shoot, the interviews. I was watching a bunch of Freddie Mercury interviews, probably like close to 30 minutes of them. He is super suave, super charismatic, and not very flamboyant, which is another thing. Now, gay men are stereotypically known to be flamboyant, stereotypically. And I do feel like Rami Malek does this a lot more than Freddie Mercury appears to be in footage that I watched of him. This also includes some casual footage of him, like just talking to bandmates and walking around. He just he seems like a normal guy that's just really funny and selfless, and he's extroverted, and he's like, everyone wants to talk to him. He's like the main guy in the room. He just wants to be himself. When he's on stage, he has a very electric presence. I think it was Elton John that said he has a lot of respect for somebody that goes on stage in a unitard or something like that. And I was like, yeah, that's pretty sick for that time period, especially. And he was just kind of like, I don't know, there's just something about him, not only just the energy of his performances, but also just the way that he talked to people, and he'd have like his cigarettes, and he I don't know. It was just, he seemed like a very complex person that was hard to portray. And Rami Malek is a fantastic actor, obviously. And the material he had here was dog. The material he had here was dog, and I feel like better direction would have helped him a lot. But long-winded answer to your question, Christian, I cannot really, Sacha Baron Cohen even, I just think there's a lot of imitation going on, and not a lot of like well thought out like character traits outside of like, be like 70s gay man pop star that always has the final word or something, is like the direction that Rami Malek got. And it's just like, that really sucks. Because not only, I mean, Freddie Mercury being a very interesting person, but also just the band members in general being intriguing people, and then just none of that got portrayed here.
There's an anxiety to, I feel like, all of Malik's performance that maybe isn't totally unwelcome, but I think runs counter to what you're saying, Mitchell, about Freddie's real, at least public persona.
Right.
And I think drawing out the distinctions between that and the way he interacts with his bandmates and his romantic relationships would have been really interesting. But I don't think Malik aims to do that.
Yeah, for sure. And it would have been a far better film, for sure, if they delved into that. And then something I alluded to was the actual formation of the band. And there's like a different bassist and stuff apparently too. And they kind of just skipped over that and just slapdash, all right, we're on tour, and it's like, wow, I wanted to see how it actually, like, they got together, because that's kind of like what the band like hive mind comes from, is like all these differing personalities coming together, and like it just didn't feel that way.
Yeah. No time. We got 2.5 hours to get to Live Aid.
Yeah.
Roger and Brian and the other guy, he plays bass. Who cares?
And Mike Myers, getting it without a radio edit.
They make Live Aid seem like it's like Freddie's gonna collapse and die as soon as he walks off stage.
Yeah.
And that's just not true. Like he recorded several more albums after Live Aid.
Yeah.
And I think even the decision to make to recreate the Live Aid concert is a little misguided to me. Like, I personally do not really care for Hammer to Fall. I think it's one of their weaker songs. And I kind of feel like at this point in the movie, I'm just waiting for it to be over a little bit. I've already heard them play or at least write Bohemian Rhapsody and We Are the Champions. And I'm frustrated as a music fan because I feel like I haven't learned much about their process as songwriters or as recording musicians. We have scenes of Freddie being kind of controlling or humorous in the mixing booth while he's getting them to play their guitar solos or their harmonies for Bohemian Rhapsody. And there's a scene towards the end where once they reunite, they agree that the songwriting credits will all just read Queen, not whichever member or her members wrote the song. But we never really delve into the conflict about songwriting credits or see them writing the song. We see the bass player like play the bass line for Another One Bites the Dust, and that's the closest we get. I would have loved to get a sense of who their producers were and what that dynamic was like, or how they innovated in the studio. And beyond the song Bohemian Rhapsody's genre swings and harsh critical reception, the movie doesn't do any of that.
Yeah, but see, what you're talking about there is almost like a Get Back style documentary project. I think this movie isn't really made for people who are genuine, earnest fans of Queen down to wanting to know about producers and songwriting and mixing and things like that. It's made for people who maybe have Queen's Greatest Hits Volume 1 somewhere on CD because their parents owned it, and they remember a lot of those songs and they like them and are kind of looking for the cinematic equivalent of that.
It's not for you, Christian. It's not for you.
I think Zach's making an important point here, though.
Yeah. I agree that it's not. It doesn't make for an especially entertaining or enlightening experience for people who actually care about those kinds of things. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, the film just isn't interested in those kinds of deep looks into much of anything. It's just kind of a page turner of, all right, and then what happened in this coffee table book. A good moment that I think really encapsulates that is when Freddie and Mary are engaged. They never get married. They're engaged. And he comes back from tour, and we've seen lots of sequences where he's been on the phone and he's sort of been like eyeing up men, and he gets back from tour and he goes, I've thought about it a lot and I think I'm bisexual. And she goes, no, Freddie, you're gay. And that's the end of the conversation. And we don't learn how he came to the realization that he didn't like women. We don't hear anything more of that conversation. It's just the film has said it, and so shall it be. Move on. I want to see them perform Another One Bites the Dust.
Apparently there's nothing complex with somebody you claim to be your common law wife. That's your lifelong friend. Yeah. And then you also have like these other guy friends. What's his name? Hutton is like his closest friend ever, and he's introduced fairly late in the game, and we don't really see, besides that one conversation of which like that whole thing is made up, like him working for him and all that is made up. And like one earnest conversation, it's like, all right, that's how gay guys get together, I guess. And then he leaves half of his fortune to that guy, like literally. So I don't get that scope, but that just goes back to what I was saying. I mean, it's so complex, and there's so much that could go into just Freddie Mercury himself. It's like, really, if you hone in on anything, it's like you're doing a disservice to the other part. So it's like, just make it all documentary at that point. It's like, get that, you know. Now, to be fair, like, the film hints at things. I want to say something positive before we move on, because the actual like editing of like their rise to stardom and like the little concert bits, even though it's not Rami Malek singing, it's that other guy mixed with Freddie Mercury singing, apparently, which is not ideal. But like the way it's filmed is pretty cool, you know, and like, you know, the little lettering and like the speed, like I got the sense of like they were like the rise to stardom was very quick into the 80s and everything. I was like, yeah, that's interesting.
It does have neat titles. I will give the movie that. And that sounds like I'm looking for anything to compliment, but like, as somebody who makes short films and picks out titles and things like that, it can be hard to find a font or a typeface that really complements what you're going for. And they consistently, I think, they find the right typefaces.
Yeah, Midwest USA.
Yes.
Madison Square Garden.
The Jurassic Park typeface for the opening credits.
I think the epilogue with Freddy's I'm forgetting his name, but the man at one point he is romantically involved with seems to be the least
producer guy.
Yes,
there you go.
No.
Different guy.
Maybe whoever he ends up with at the end.
Oh,
and then the post credit is like, they lived a happy life for Jim. I think that epilogue at least functions to somewhat disarm the cynical way it examines homosexuality, intentional or not. I think that button is at least enough for most viewers not to come away from the movie thinking that the movie vilifies Freddy or his sexual orientation. But I still think those moments are egregious. The one where he's like at the gas station on the phone with Mary, and then the mustachioed trucker steps out of his van and like tips his baseball cap to Freddy, and Freddy's like, oh my gosh, and then it like zooms in on the men sign on the bathroom door. It's like, Jesus Christ, guys.
Yeah, it's almost like the film goes off the assumption that Freddie Mercury was making his bisexuality or homosexuality his personality, and that it's like a critical part of his character. And if it wasn't, that everybody in the world was trying to get him to make it that way. And the film poorly communicates, if doesn't communicate that at all, that is not true. That Freddie Mercury was an individual that clearly preferred men, and that's it. That's the end of that discussion, really. The relationships he has, different story, but like that's kind of the aspect that, at least on the romantic side, was really missing. And it just didn't make sense in vaguely knowing like Freddie Mercury's actual story and all of the, parties and the drugs and the Munich stuff was like you could do a whole film just on Munich, basically.
Mm-hmm. That seemed to every like big 70s 80s musician has a Munich chapter in their career that you could make a whole movie about David Bowie, about Iggy Pop, about Freddie Mercury and Munich.
Yeah. I think I appreciate the way that the Live Aid ending is choreographed on stage, but I still find the digital crowds so artificial and distracting. And since I've come after dubbing a lot in some of Zach's Italian horror movies, I've got to come after it here because it is so bad, especially the first performance the band ever does with Freddie. It seems like Freddie is singing a completely different song up there, and they've got a backing track to them, and it gets better from there. But it's I don't know, just another way in which this feels artificial at every turn. And as someone that loves making music and has been in bands as a hobby, mm-hmm. It's not very hard for me. It's not hard to make me feel those emotions on a basic level when you're depicting a band as they get together, as they play together and make music together. That's at its core concept. It's a simple thing, and I think it's a fundamental failure of this movie that I'm never stirred by any of the stuff with the band.
Yeah,
I do think it's maybe especially the weird focus on Freddie's sexuality, where they can't decide if they're underplaying it or overplaying it, is maybe the product of it not knowing if it wants to be a movie about Freddie or about the band. And I would say it is more about Freddie. Mm-hmm. But the band seems to want to be a focus in there as well, and so it ends up this weird kind of it's a strange watch. And I would say, not to just take pot shots at Queen, But, you know, for all the insistence that We Are All Queen, I mean, they haven't released an album since Freddie died. So,
Queen Plus. You haven't heard about Queen Plus, Zach?
Is Queen Plus a completely different... Oh, do they do like collaboration albums where they bring in Queen Plus blank, or...
I think Queen Plus is on tour. Queen Plus, whoever the guy that's the lead vocalist.
Adam
Lambert.
Yeah.
America's Got Talent finalist, or American Idol finalist,
American
Adam
Idol,
Lambert.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it time to review the week? Have we put Bohemian Rhapsody to bed?
We're all just done.
Yep. Any way the wind blows. Okay, on to week in review.
Sometimes the actual discussion is like you wind up the podcast and then it goes around, then stop. And then you got to pick it up and move it over to the week in review and plug it back in.
Usually by episodes. Go ahead.
Well, I'm gonna cheat a little bit for week in review and not talk about something I've watched or read, because I've been very busy the past weekend. My first weekend of shooting for a film that I'm making, which by the time this episode of the podcast comes out, we might have finished making it. But I'm working on an adaptation of The Telltale Heart. At the time of recording, we just did our first weekend of shooting and also just wrapped a crowdfunding campaign last week. So thank you to everybody who donated or shared our campaign or told people about it. We had a really great, productive first weekend. I'm tired. I haven't done this since college, and I forgot how much it wore me out. And I also slept overnight at location and forgot shampoo and soap.
God.
So Monday wasn't fun when I had to go direct from location to work. But it was a blast to be on set again, filming with everybody with a very big, expensive camera. With working with my friends and actors I've kind of accrued over the years. And hopefully everybody will get to see it next year, 2026, when we start shopping around to festivals. If you paid for an early screener, you'll get that early next year as well. So just a little update on Telltale Heart, bit of a cheat on my part, just because it's been so long since I watched or read or listened to anything on account of working on that.
Woo!
Nice, very nice, Zach. And congratulations on the crowdfunding and all the shooting.
Well, thank you.
Let me know when the game adaptation's coming out. I'm gonna play it.
I'll keep. We'll do a point and click adventure game. That's what we'll do.
Yeah, it's coming to the 3DS and nowhere else.
Yeah, you'll play as the inspectors who you have to like click on the door. Excuse me, sir.
Is it under the floorboard?
Yeah. Click the floorboards to see if there's anything on. Maybe one's loose.
I've been doing new releases on every week in review this season.
No.
But I'm going to break the trend just to punctuate further how much I loved this movie that I watched at the Cleveland Cinematheque this past week. I watched Linda, 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 a Japanese film about a group of schoolgirls that form a band and rehearse together and put on a little show at the school talent show. And it sounds very provincial, but I found it to be absolutely miraculous, and I loved it. It was an easy 5 out of 5 for me, and it sits currently at second place in my 4 favorites on Letterboxd. So this made a huge impression on me.
Wow. And
in many ways, it does so much of what I longed for Bohemian Rhapsody to do. It depicts the first half-life of a band. You see them coming together and these girls sort of arbitrarily picking their lead singer, who is a Korean exchange student. And you see them sort of rehearse and struggle with the music. But a lot of the great stuff is their relationships and not really the music they're making. It's more about their friendships. And there are great scenes, like one where one of the bandmates is late to rehearsal to the point where they have to give up the rehearsal room, and then they just end up wandering and like getting food together and hanging out. And like that is something that I lived through in college when I had bandmates and did this nonsense. And there are great moments of little comedy and really heartrending relationship bits. Like there's this huge scene where I don't want to give it away, but basically like a boy is confessing his feelings to one of the girls, and the way it plays out is very sweet and funny. And this just gave me intense heartache for the good old days. It made me feel like a washed up has been. It made me miss college more than anything else. But it also made me realize that some of my happiest moments were those where I made something with friends. But then the flip side of that coin is that most of the time, the making of the thing or the thing that we made itself, be it a song we wrote or a concert we put on, that was never more valuable than the friendship itself, which might sound obvious to a lot of people, but for me, and perhaps as a byproduct of this podcast, I spend a lot of time thinking perhaps too critically about what it is I'm trying to make or do or entertain myself with. And I think this movie really gave me perspective about how much relationships matter. And I'm just rambling now, but you have to see Linda if you're a creative collaborator of any stripe. Certainly if you're a musician. I think the first 20 minutes are a little slow, but it's ultimately very, very moving, and the music is quite good once it gets there.
Well, if you're a simp for Shailene Woodley or Joseph Gordon-Levitt, then
What?
and you rapidly hate
I know what this is.
the U.S. government,
The state.
Okay.
then you can watch Snowden. I ripped the Band-Aid off. Okay. I watched Snowden. First of all, I didn't like the film. Just to preface, did not like the film very much. It takes very nuanced political topics and historical events that are extremely well documented and either completely fictionalizes them, I guess for the sake of having Nicolas Cage be in the CIA, who's a made-up character, by the way.
Just like Mike Myers.
right? Yeah, we're seeing a trend. Yeah. Or to do what Edward Snowden wanted to do and just popularize the story, I guess, because he did advise on the film. And he shows up in the film at the end. Not just in the interview, but literally like is in frame, like actually filmed in person. I'm assuming in Russia, but yeah. So it takes very broad, very complicated topics about national security and basically whittles them down to he was trying to save American lives and American privacy and defend the Constitution by purposefully disseminating tens, if not hundreds of thousands of classified documents to The Guardian to then be published to the world. Now, there are processes in place to decide what can be downgraded or declassified. And Edward Goober Snowden is not at all at the experience level or the skill level, which they heavily exaggerate in the film, to make those types of national security implicating decisions. Hence why the decisions that he made, while cannot be directly traced or affected, to disseminate this information was heavily damaging to national security. It included disposition of not only American government officials and military, a lot of it was military, but also second and third party partners like GCHQ operatives who had to be pulled out of actual operating environments because their lives were at risk because of what he did. And it is up to you to decide whether he's a hero or a traitor in that regard. But I made my decision before the film even happened. And it's very dramatized. It takes a lot of stylistic tellings, almost like The Matrix, and kind of just saying, oh, these tools are like, it just tells you everything about everybody everywhere in the world. Like the NSA knows everything about everybody. And if you know anything basic about cybersecurity or networking, you know that is impossible. That is so very, very not possible. It was not possible before the Patriot Act, and it's not possible now. So, yeah, the point is there are risks to doing what on its face looks like the right thing. The film does not explore that nuance at all. It very much makes you feel like you have been handheld like a little kid. Like, come on, all right, he's doing everything for American privacy. No, nobody's getting hurt by what he's doing right now. This is all Bush and Obama's fault, and they're both horrible and nothing good. Government do nothing good. His conclusion. So. Did not like that whatsoever. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is a good actor. His low tone of voice he uses to imitate Snowden is kind of annoying and just like not super accurate, I guess. But like, yeah, and the love story is just annoying, and like there's some aspects of it. It's like, oh, if you know classified stuff and you can kind of relate to it, I guess, like talking to people and they're, you're in a relationship and it's complicated when you know things you can't tell them and things like that. Like that's an interesting premise, but no, it's not really about that. It's really just like, dude, government so bad. You have to tell everybody about this. I'm like, oh, how am I going to do it? Oh no. Oh, the CIA is on to me. Oh no. And it's just like, what is happening? This is so not realistic at all. But anyway, that's how I felt about it. I recommend it though. I do. Oh. I do recommend it to people that are interested in it. It's not like dog water. Like don't watch it. It's a waste of time. But I do think it sparks interesting discussions, and it did make me want to do more research into what actually happened and what the agency was really like before Snowden, which was a lot different, and there was a lot of very positive changes that happened as a result of that. So take that as you will.
Well, is it time for me to pick a prompt for next episode?
Pick the prompt. Pick the prompt.
We're getting down to a fairly low number of prompts, I feel. Let's see here. Okay. Oh, okay. This is a nice broad one. A film that uses puppetry.
Whoa, that's a good one.
So a lot of room there for interpretation. Yes. I'll have to. And I think that prompt is broad enough that, like, I can get shadow puppets in there. I can get marionettes in there.
Definitely marionettes.
You should have locked in Christian. You messed it up. You know, Italian horror. There's puppets somewhere.
Oh, yeah, there probably is.
Bet.
But I thought of it as I mean, we talked about the Muppet movie, but we talk about technique things, and I feel like puppetry is sort of sadly a dying art. So that was my inspiration.
Yeah. Oh no, this is an interesting one. I'll have to give this some thought, and I'll try not to show up next time with an Italian giallo with like an incredibly long title, "The Marionette That Dances Upon the Moon in the Middle of the Night." Or so, that would be
and somehow there's topless women in it. Somehow.
The stringless marionette of her smile.
Oh,
if that movie doesn't exist, you'll make it in 20 years.
Maybe, yeah. I'll write that. Maybe I can change my business cards.
The game of the game of the game of the game of the game.